Hi, good afternoon. Oh,
Do you want us-
everyone's disappeared. Quite rightly so as well. Are you waiting for some other people or?
We can start everything.
Okay. You know, like I was mentioning that I started feeling terribly inadequate. So much of erudition, and now you're going to have to bear with some plain speaking. I mean, you know, the presentations were so cool, but I didn't understand the connections, and that has been one of the areas where I have been working or trying to work as far as journalism is concerned, to be able to join the dots. I don't think so we generally join the dots to arrive at a big picture, and we often get a very skewed picture. Now, journalists would tell you that that is the nature of the beast, because that is how we work. But I am obsessed, and I have been obsessed with the danger of the single story. But just going back, I'll come back to this danger of the single story. But I'll start with a little letter that was written by the BBC Director General when BBC realized how important social media is and how they need to integrate social media to the whole network. And I will intersperse what he said with my little inputs and probably show you a video of the video which was actually sparked or marked the point in India where social media started getting was being taken more seriously. I mean, people realized that from that point of time the power that social media had. Now, imagine a city surrounded, 12,000 troops besieging the population, the Air Force bombing the city to erase the entry of infantry and tanks through narrow streets. Government forces ring the city with artillery and shell it for 3 weeks. Thousands are dead, and yet the world does nothing. The country is Syria, but this is not Homs or Aleppo. It's Hama. The date, February 1982. 3 decades on, thousands are dying again in Syria. But a generation later, something important has changed. The uprisings that have convulsed the Arab world have gone hand in hand with another revolution. In the ways and means, people are telling stories. 30 years after Hama, thanks to technology, there's no hiding the reality of what's going on in Syria. In so many ways, this revolution is also a fight for control. People demanding to be active participants, no longer happy to remain passive recipients. So this is the main strand, the main theme, I suppose, of how people have taken control. People are not going to be listening any longer, they are going to be speaking. The international news media is going through one of its worst crises. Even in India, we are going through a very, very deep recession in every possible way. And at a time when technology has put the audience in charge. It is a convulsion that is testing every news organization. With web, social interactivity and globalization, news brands are in a battle for attention. But what happens when the audience is in charge? There is a danger. And when the audience is in charge, there is a danger of the news going completely out of control. So anyway, this video was basically a video of a Muslim lady wearing a hijab and crying, and bodies of dead children with bruise marks were being shown. The police was there. It was a little bit of random footage and very long footage that was played out. And this was played out from somewhere very close to where we are today. So it all started in 2012. We had just graduated to the Android platform our networks were forcing us to use social network to be able to break news faster. We were under tremendous pressure with the social. We were not being able to. We were trying to grapple and understand what social media is all about. And then suddenly we had the riots in Kokrajhar in Lower Assam. The first day when I was there, for first 24 hours, actually I kept saying riots between two communities because I did not know how to describe the two communities, or probably it was a subconscious effort to try and quell, if possible at all. But that created more confusion. I was told by my office that you may as well mention it clearly which these two communities are. But for an understanding of the larger Indian context, it's very difficult for anyone to understand if you say plains, tribal from Assam, a community, an ethnic, called Bodos, against, you can't say Muslims. You can also say Bengali Muslims. It's very difficult to define these two communities. But anyway, however, we did carry on with our coverage without realizing that this video was being circulated all across India, all across the world, that Muslims in Assam were being tortured. So in Bombay, you had a huge riot, and the social media rumors in Bangalore, Pune, etc. made thousands of people come home. This video was of the Rohingyas. It's from Burma. So it's pretty clear. If I could show you, you would have understood even the way they speak, the physical characteristics of the people. So it was not from this part of the world. I'm not very sure whether the government investigated and found out who had put the video on Twitter. It came on Twitter first, and apparently they did. The easy way of putting it is to put the blame on ISI, but I'm not very sure who exactly did it. But there was some, whether it was mischief, whether there was a method to it, one isn't sure. But like I said, this was the first time that the government of India felt challenged. Media felt completely inadequate under the power of social media. There was nothing that I could do to quell this rumor. So anything that I said on broadcast it did not convey, because like I was telling her, that not even 1% of the country watch English language media, television. And your reach with Twitter and Facebook, etc. is far more instant. So anything that we said or tried to clarify did not really reach. The rumor really spread. It spread over a period of 48 hours, and over the next 48 hours, thousands of people started coming. So the speed with which this organism really works is phenomenal. And we know, I'm just repeating these things. I know that there is a good part to it. I'll come to it, why it's good. But we saw the detrimental effect of it. We know how many people died. 110 people died in that riot. About 5 lakh people were displaced. But it could have, that would have happened even without the social media. So this 110 and this 5 lakh people were not product of the social media. What social media did primarily was create a situation in Bangalore, Pune, Bombay, Delhi, etc. Those areas where there were a lot of people from the northeast. And something that we actually blocked as news. And that was the first time in my life actually I actually blacked out that piece of news. And ensured in the sense that now I can say ensured, but I actually tried that even the social media wouldn't get it. And I spoke to Twitter myself to be able to do it. Then one of the trains coming from Bangalore, 7 men were actually thrown out of the train and killed. And it was Eid the next day. They had started their prayers early morning at 5 a.m. The rest of the people in the compartment all were coming. All were from the northeast, and they were coming home after the rumors. And when these 7 or 10, or I don't know how many of them were, started doing the namaz, they were thrown out of the train and they were killed. We managed to black that news out, but that's just a chance coincidence. if that news had gone out on the day before Eid, then we would have had actually serious riots across the country. So, rumor, this is what I was talking about, social media rumor, the speed at which it goes, the pressure. The third point is on media practitioner, the pressure of social media on people like us to perform sometimes becomes very detrimental. Because what happens is that I on the field may not have the connectivity to be going through all the fields that are coming in. I do not have the time to do that. But my office or any central location where people are monitoring all the television channels, all the radio, all the newspapers are also these days monitoring social media. So every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, I as a reporter on the ground keep getting calls from my office saying that something has happened in this area, something has happened in this area. Now as a lead it works very well because I would not have otherwise known. As a lead I know, but what happens is that because it's not authenticated, there would be 15 to 20 leads coming in a period of 1 hour. A person alone on the ground in a conflict zone cannot attend to all those 10 to 15 leads. And if I don't attend, I may be missing the story. So the pressure on me, as it is work under tremendous pressure on the field because you are grappling with logistical problem, with technology, with speed, etc. And then you have this beast on you, which is like good and bad, but you don't know how to handle it. I mean, at least I haven't been able to figure out how to handle the pressure of social media when you're on the ground, because everybody seems to be knowing, except for you, what has happened where. And you feel like a complete fool because the news has broken even before you have even anticipated something would be happening in that area. And then by the time you reach out there, the news is all out flashed. So you become redundant. I'll tell you an interesting incident later if we have time of this redundancy that I felt once when I was live on air. Now the truth is that journalists live their lives according to a rather sad routine. Every moment they are on their smartphones to catch on what's been happening, not by turning on the radio, watching the TV or going onto the web, but by looking at Twitter feed. It's a sort of digital coffee. 200 feeds, a mix of traditional aggregators, individuals. We are even encouraged to follow celebrities, or what Amitabh Bachchan would be saying, or what Amir Khan would be saying. That's important to news, apparently. Networks encourage their employees to follow a variety of people and institutions. Gone are the days when audiences were content to only listen or watch what we produced for them. Social media engagement with increasing use of mobile technology, Twitter, Facebook, Skype, means that our audiences now have the ability to break news faster than journalists and find the first pictures when an event happens, and possibly also send some selfies. It is something that should be exploited as an aid for us and not taken as an adversarial stance. I mean, we do have an adversarial attitude towards that, but actually it can be used much more effectively because you are getting the leads much better. The only problem is that I don't have a problem with the leads, I have a problem with the pressure that comes on me from my news desk if I am on the feed. More often than not, it has served as our best sources. Journalists out here that a journalist basically works with sources. I mean, that we want primary sources. That is what news gathering is all about. And the better sources you have, the better journalist you are. And this Twitter or any of these social media are my sources. But it's just that it's such a planet of sources that I have to basically be very discerning and able to identify which are the sources that I'm going to follow. So something interesting, let me give you an example now. So the one example that I gave you was a bad example, but one that actually started the ball rolling, one where people realized the power of social media because it galvanized forces through a fake video, let's say, and created a lot of division. It made thousands and thousands of people run away from home. It created riots. So how social media can actually trigger violence. But the good part of it and how it comes as a lead as well. One evening I remember and out here we have people from UNICEF, so it would be of interest to them. So I was going to bed and I just went onto my Facebook page just as a habit, which I tell myself every day that I shall kick that habit, but I don't. I still go out there before going to sleep. And then I saw this horrifying picture of a back of a child, and it looked purple. And I couldn't make out why one of my friends in Nagaland would be posting such a picture of a child's back with wearing shorts, and it's purple. It was purple. So I didn't make much sense of it, but I saw my name tagged out there. And the person who had posted it said that if you are not asleep, please please call me up because I can't get through to you. And I called her up and I said, what is this picture about? And she said that this was a child working in someone's house, because in Northeast, you see, we have this trend of children working in people's home in exchange for education that the owner of the home provides. Because in far-flung districts, you don't have schools, you don't have proper education, so these kids are sent by their parents to the cities, and this is how they receive education. In many cases, they get trafficked. Now, this young boy was brought from the Hague district of Nagaland and brought to Kohima, and he used to live with an engineer and engineer's house, and he used to cook for him and attend school during the day. And every evening, the engineer would come and beat him with a copper wire. I mean, that was his pastime. So, I think it probably reached a point of desperation where the child ran out, and this is how they got. Now, what happened with this picture was not the perpetrator getting arrested. That's an easy thing to do. That's we don't need social media for that. But we started blowing up this thing about child abuse, and we figured out that Nagaland did not have a child shelter. Nagaland did not have any provision for children who are abused to be put up. So now at that night, where will this child stay? So that was the problem, because sending back to the family was not possible, because it was going to take 2 days for them to reach. Keeping the child in a police station is going to be traumatic. Keeping them in someone's house is not, according to the law, not the right thing to do at that point of time. Who's going to take responsibility of this child? So we had these problems, and that became a debate over the next day. And over the next 1 week, Nagaland actually had an ad hoc child shelter. And there was, I'm not very sure that Nagaland's child abuse situation has improved with that one thing. But one picture on social media really helped. So, and this is not just one. There are hundreds and hundreds of cases where social media has been able to. Say, for example, there's a place called Haflong. You know Haflong? It's in Assam, where I was sent this video which went really viral about a girl who runs a shop, a garment shop, and was being abused or I suppose molested in a sense, verbally, with an army jawan. And she came out and she started beating this army jawan with stones. And she went on. And someone clicked it over a mobile phone and passed it on to me, and then we carried it for the next 24 hours. It was dramatic, but it also forced the army to kind of react to it. There was another case of trafficking, which was again, I'm saying that we did carry it on TV, but aided by social media. The pictures were brought to me by means of smartphones. The videos went viral with social media. It's difficult to make it viral through television. So the effect of those, the impact of it is immediate, the impact is far-reaching, and possibly it has greater impact in many cases than just television stories. Now, the great new advantage of the internet or the news medium is that it provides a fair and equal environment. I suppose that is what we are discussing today, the democracy, how democratic it is. So the equal environment for the battle of ideas and is less subject to technical interference at a national level. That's very important, except for countries like China, perhaps. But the media revolution is also changing the dynamics of the relationship. No longer producer and consumer, but a more equal relationship. One where the audience can answer back, and we are forced to listen. So in many cases, it's not about me giving the news out. I am now answerable the moment I give a news out because I'm questioned. Often I may be trolled, but if you keep the troll aside, there are also some serious questions, which makes you introspect, which makes you do fact checking, which makes you do cross check. Earlier, I would be, my interaction with the world in terms of television, not in terms of the story news gathering. In news gathering, you interact with real people. But when I come in front of the camera, for years, my connection with the world was one of isolation because I only spoke to the camera. The camera never spoke to me. Or there was no feedback mechanism, except if my office or my mother watching would tell me something. But apart from that, there was no feedback mechanism. Today, there is a feedback mechanism. The moment the news goes on air, people are on social media, either tearing it apart, either retweeting it, either sending it across. So you know which stories are seizing the imagination of the audience. They can like on Facebook, tweet on Twitter, though, as Tessie was saying, that likes can't feed a child. But perhaps it kind of it works as a campaign. And it's the organizations that can deepen their relationship with their audience that will prosper. People want brands that are real. It's a mantra that suggests that applies not just to the media market, but to any organization wanting to get its message heard. And apart from media, I'll tell you my own experiences of how it works to get your message heard. It's, say for example, very recently I had a friend whose family was traveling to Nepal, and they figured out at the last moment that one of the members of the family had only an Aadhaar card and did not have a passport. And applied for the passport hadn't arrived. Now, to Nepal, actually, you don't need a passport. Any Indian government identification card works. But I still told them that why don't you just cross-check with the airport rather than going and having a situation there. And SpiceJet told them that no, Aadhaar card is not going to happen, we need a passport. But I went and checked the Airport Authority of India and SpiceJet and everything else, and I found out that no Aadhaar card works. So what I did is that I didn't call up and pick a fight, which I would have done 5 years back. I just tweeted to SpiceJet, saying that SpiceJet harassing passengers, not allowing them to board Nepal, their flight to Nepal with an Aadhaar card. And the reaction was instantaneous. So within 30 seconds, you had a reply saying that please follow us and share your number on a direct message. And that gentleman boarded the flight with the Aadhaar card. I had a medical insurance last year. After buying the medical insurance, I figured out that it didn't cover a lot of things. And but once you buy, it's difficult to get back the money. You have to at least, even if you return it, they keep about 10% to 20% of it. But then again, I went on Twitter and I tweeted about it. I said that this is what they are selling. They are selling insurance, but they actually don't cover 9 different kinds of diseases. And they actually paid back the entire money. So the pressure, you can understand, that can be created only through a simple 140 character tweet is beyond media's understanding. Now the argument about the role of media is no longer a dominant media or a majoritarian voice, because now everything gets settled by the greatest superpower the world has ever known, the internet. Its openness and transparency provide a level playing field. It creates a battleground for the most trustworthy information and the most compelling ideas. And for those who want their message heard, it provides another route to the consumer. But we are still grappling with the challenge of the single narrative, and the social media has not been able to penetrate it. I'm going to come to it a little later towards the end of it. Now, what happens is, though the internet, like I said, is the biggest superpower, and that decides everything, and cutting off the middleman. So you don't have the middleman any longer. You are there on the internet. I am there. Others are there, and we are exchanging, crashing out. We are waging our wars out there with equal opportunities. It can't get more equal than that. But will the journalists be fading out anytime soon? I mean, that is the question that journalism is now confronted with. But what happens if everybody is going to be in charge of news? If everybody can break news, then what will the journalists do? It's something that journalists have been trying to understand. My understanding is that journalists are not going to fade away anytime soon, because we would still require someone to dissect and investigate and come out with the truth. Well, the problem of social media, as you all understand, I suppose, is that how do you authenticate a piece of news? So there is no means of doing that. That is not possible unless. So again, what happens is that on a Twitter, and I'm just taking the case of Twitter right now. On Twitter, you are following the news organizations tweeting. So, but if you are going to follow individuals tweeting, you may end up, with a wrong piece of news, with some amount of rumor involved in that. So that's where I feel that the journalists may still be able to survive. Now, the gold standard of news will not be thrown out, because that will be the guiding light. However, the once all-powerful institutions brought down because they failed to heed the warnings or listen to the cries for change. In the world of the future, news organizations need to stop fearing the audience, stop fearing change, stop fearing technology. Traditional values of accuracy, fairness, and respect for others, that's going to continue. But also about harnessing modern technology. So news is going to be about the gold standards of accuracy, fairness, and respect for others. But if it doesn't harness technology, then it is going to be overthrown. Now, the single story that I've been mentioning again and again, and that's not something, that's not my copyright, as in a lot of people across the world have been talking about the single story. You can go to the TED Talks up there. There is a wonderful TED lecture called The Danger of a Single Story by a writer, an African writer. I can't pronounce her name. What's her name? Yes, I still will not be able to pick up that name. And she's brilliant, absolutely. And so this is something that I thought social media will be able to help, but I have not yet seen social media's role in that. What it is about and why I am here today is that, I cover conflict. All my life I've covered conflict, which sounds sexy, but it's actually very boring. Because what happens is that, a bomb doesn't go off every day. But the expectation from a conflict zone is that every footage that is going to come, every piece of news that is going to come from a conflict zone is going to be dramatic. It isn't dramatic. You wait for news to happen, and you start feeling guilty almost to be able to see dead bodies. So at the end of your career, you say that I counted as many body bags as much. That's what conflict reporting is all about. Now, what happened was that after covering years and years of various levels of conflict, I realized that I was not being able to represent the voices of the disenfranchised, and that is the topic that was given to me. So there were other strands, there were other narratives in the conflict zone, the stories that had to be told. And that space was not there. Because the nature of the beast is such that if you are going to cover conflict, you are going to cover conflict. I mean, in a place where people are dying, you obviously don't go and do a story on their food and on their dance. But surely every day, like I told you, the bomb was not going off. But every day what was happening? People were falling in love. People were dying, funeral processions were happening, people were getting married, people were winning tournaments, people were rejoicing, everything else was happening like any other part of the world. And theoretically, a conflict generally goes on for about 15 years, but in India's northeast and many other parts of the country, that theory has been debunked because Algeria conflict has been going on for 60 years. Now what happens? we haven't been reporting for 60 years, but let's say we've been reporting for 20 years, 25 years. So for 25 years, if you are going to report a place only with the prism, only with the perspective, the picture, the visuals, and the narrative of violence, which is what we are meant to be doing, then for the rest of the people, these places and people get stereotyped. And when it gets stereotyped, that is what I meant by saying the danger of the single story. So you have a danger of the single narrative because it stereotypes people, and these people then become disenfranchised. So I'm not talking of the disenfranchised in other sense, but I'm talking about this sense. This, how do you empower them? They are economically empowered. It's not about that empowerment, but the empowerment is that they are trapped into the image of the aggressor, of the terrorist, of the separatist. Now, how do you shrug that image off? So I believe that the only way of shrugging that image was to be able to increase the coverage of a place. Now, how do you increase the coverage of a place? To have more stories come out of that place, right? Now, how on earth are you going to have more stories coming out of the place? Because media, going through a terrible crisis, economic crisis, cannot afford to have reportage, because reportage is expensive. So you cannot afford to have people on the ground. I'll give you I'll give you the cost analysis in the next sentence. So but at the same time, for example, I used to cover 12 states. Now physically it's not possible to go to 12 states every day and see what's happening. So we created a network of what we call stringers. International media calls them fixers for whatever reason. And the stringers were our primary sources. And whenever we required footage, we went to them and they would give us the footage. But nobody ever went to them and taught them or explained to them or nobody had a chat with them of what journalism was all about. So they were there embedded with the local politician, the army and the police, and they would only deliver when asked to deliver. But they had the information. So I was proposing that if we do capacity building of these grassroots journalists, as I call them, then there is a possibility of a multiple narrative coming out of these places. And then if there is a multiplicity of narrative from those places, then there is a possibility in the long term that the stereotype can be defined, okay, or you can fight prejudice in a way. The easier way of doing this would have been social media. There are a number of, for example, I don't know whether you heard of this group called the Video Volunteers. So Jessica and Stalin, who run Video Volunteers, have got 200 young people across 20 states. And they're trained to do, their community video training is imparted to them. My reservation with Jessica is that increasingly what happened, even though 200 people are there with, say, 200 clips every week, but mainstream media doesn't seem to pick them up because there is a very thin line between activism and journalism. And when you trespass that line, then journalists don't pick that up. So, and I had this discussion with her, and I felt that increasingly video volunteers are seen as a more of an, community speaking for themselves. The journalists don't necessarily do that. That's not our job. And so we should be able, but there have been efforts. There have been huge efforts. There have been efforts of another person in Chhattisgarh. He's also trained the community in using mobile phones. BBC Media Action has been trying to do that in various parts. But in each of these efforts, it's becoming not counterproductive really, but it's not really, the impact on the ground is not so much because no one's picking those stories up. Because the moment you pick up stories from an activist point of view, then you're not being fair. So how does social media really, how can we use social media in enabling the grassroots journalists so that mainstream media gets a regular supply of multiple narratives, and through that, we defy stereotypes. That is what I want to leave you with the question, to come up with. I mean, I don't have an answer to that. I'm trying and experimenting that with this idea but I still don't I haven't found social media effective to that extent. So while social media has been extremely effective with its speed, with providing leads, with spreading rumors, with putting a lot of pressure, making you act, react, talk to the recipients, but it still has not been able to cover the shadow areas of our country, or specifically if you're talking about a country. So the shadow areas remain shadow areas. So we are not, so a story from Himachal Pradesh does not trend. A story from Leh and Ladakh does not trend. So if you go on the trends, it's again the mainstream ideas that are trending. Shillong, I don't think so Shillong has ever trended. So how do we get that out there? That's not something that we can force. Okay, but Kokra had trended for some time, but that was for the wrong reason. So we haven't been able to get any of these shadow areas into that list of trends. I'll stop here so that we can have as people increasingly depart, at least we can spend some time interaction, because I am more comfortable interacting with people rather than talking at length. There was a very interesting case study which I thought, if the time permits in the interaction, I'll share with you, where social media was not used by a community, but the social media advantage was leveraged. I'll mention about it, but let me first take some questions, or at least interact, not questions, but if we can interact a little, I'll be very happy. Thank you.